Howdy, howdy, y'all. Might not know me, but my name is Landon Dally. Creative circles, I like to go by Elrin the Explorer, but now is time to be a little bit more serious. I am making this video to introduce an endeavor that I and the R4 group are going to be partaking in, and an invite for y'all to join us. So, I'm one of the co-developers behind the R4Dash and R4Go initiatives, and I'd like to share how this project came to life. It started when I saw the incredible work that Dan Van Atta did with the WNC supply sites, a lightweight coordination platform built in response to disaster logistic chaos during Hurricane Helene. Dan saw that supplies weren't reaching where they needed to be the most and built a tool to help fix it. It worked really well. But as I saw how people engaged with that system, something else became very clear. There's so many people willing to volunteer, skilled, ready, and motivated, but they have no idea where their time could make the most difference. The problem isn't just about moving supplies, it's about activating people. We need better coordination not only for logistics, but for human effort. That's what sparked the idea behind R4Dash and R4Go. What if we could apply the same logic that WNC used for supply chain redistribution to people? What if we had a way to show volunteers what needs exist in real time, match them with tasks based on location, skills, and urgency, track and reward their contributions to grow trust and autonomy, and make participation feel doable, even fun, especially in overwhelming times? So I partnered with R4 to develop this modular extension of the WNC supply sites, R4Dash and R4Go. But what exactly is that? And what are we even building? It starts with disaster response, but it doesn't end there. R4Dash is the dashboard for organizers, and R4Go is the street-level application for action. Together, they're designed to make volunteering scalable, transparent, and rewarding, even across languages, devices, and disconnected zones. We're designing with two realities in mind. That first being disaster mode, what sadly we are in right now even, where bandwidth is low and urgency is high. But second, sunny skies, where we can practice, improve, and build long-term civic infrastructure based on community engagement. Our mission is to turn goodwill into impact at scale. If you're part of the 8 Arena network, or just someone passionate about community resilience, we're looking for people to help co-develop, test, and refine this platform with us. Let's make it easier to show up for each other, no matter the storm. I have a bit of a pitch to show as well. So, R4Dash and R4Go. This is a request for collaboration, specifically to 8 Arena, and that's where I will be posting this. I'm going to be posting this on my YouTube channel, hopefully Abysmal. I've been doing devlogs and have been trying to figure out what I want to do with my time since graduation for the past now 33 days. I'm still new to all of this, but I'm finding that what I want to do is just this: civic coordination and gamification. So, R4Dash. You can find the repo at hopefully Abysmal / R4-R4-R4Go. We're going to be building on top of the WNC supply sites, and that is just a fork of that. But yeah, let's jump right into this. So, we're evolving WNC Disaster Relief's platform into a modular coordination system that works both during disaster and daily life, and we'd love your help. This is a request for the 8 Arena network for co-development, feedback, and cross-pollination on the components below. MVP needs. So, first we're going to be building out a prototype. We really have to get something tested, but before that, we want to be able to help where it's needed, and right now that's going to be in the disaster supply sites itself. So, first things first, we're going to be building that out with R4. And then second, jumping straight into gamification. Right now, we're kind of in the planning phase for all of the gamification while we do the development for disastersupplysites.org. But gamification is where we're really wanting y'all's help. The first core feature of whatever we build would be volunteer profiles and role customization. Ideally, this would help structure the users in a way that's lightweight, publicly visible, and has some sort of identity validation and trust associated with this. badges are where we think gamification is going to come in, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But this role system would ideally help figure out where people need to go in the first place before we can get any algorithms up. So that's what we're going to be getting set up. But what we're looking for in collaboration are any existing profile systems or modules we could adapt, really, in specific for this. We don't want to reinvent any wheels, as will become aptly apparent. Second, on R4Go, the way we are positing this is such that it is akin to Pokemon Go, a map-based task viewing portal. We are aware of the TAK, and they do like who's where doing what, but we think that needs to be fleshed out a little bit further for gamification, but that's something we're actively working on. The specifics of this that we need to build out are geotagged task systems, such that the volunteers can interact, browse, claim, and complete real-world actions on an actual map UI, and having the database set up with that. We're going to be working towards that. What we're looking for in collaboration is input into potential for route planning, en route task batching, and efficient location filters. Figuring out ways to really be purposeful with our actions and what tasks we show the users. We don't want to be wasting time, especially in a disaster situation. So the actual back end side of this is going to need a lot more development than just throwing a bunch of pins on the map. So the initial gamification layer, ideally we would be just having the metric be the incentive, akin to that of the Duolingo badges, and like some form of maybe experience points or some gamification layer. But that Duolingo-esque feel is really what we're shooting for, a mid-level of gamification that isn't going to be inhibitory to any participation. So badges tied to real-world tasks, meaning like, say I do a specific number of deliveries, I do a specific number of wellness checks, I scout out needs, take pictures of the landscape during a disaster, miscellaneous tasks that can be associated with in-game rewards that allow for a social pressure to motivate further than just what it is. There's no need for economic incentives when being able to show off that you did this thing can potentially be enough. I know altruism is great, but sometimes we need a little bit of the dopamine. So, in collaboration requests, we're going to be seeking out collaborators to test any of this logic and explore what really motivates volunteers, if not this Duolingo type system, because this doesn't exist right now for volunteers. That means there is something innately, whether it is just an internal sense of altruism or external viewing that people are in need. What exactly motivates volunteers, and can we push that further to bring people who potentially wouldn't otherwise volunteer into something like this? Fourth, needs reporting and matching. If there's no tasks to be done, then there is no gamification, there's nothing else. So we need to have some form of intake on the tasks themselves. So we'll be building out likely just a basic intake form, just fill it out, and we can manually change what's needed and fit it into whatever schema that we develop. That'll be talked about shortly. But this needs to be automated for it to be scalable. We don't want just the heads of these relief centers going through and matching this all the time. That is a waste of their time that they could be using for doing the volunteering themselves if they need to. So ideally, building out self-matching systems seems to be the first thing that comes to my mind, akin to Uber for mutual aid. If anybody has ever driven Uber before, I myself have, you've got a map, you have the tasks, and it just auto-assigns you what you need to do based on what you can do, and sadly for also what price for Uber, but it's something that we can build out and use. So for collaborative development, we're seeking out insights in sector taxonomy standards and intake triage logic. And what I mean by that is twofold. The sector taxonomy standards, what needs are going to be sorted how, do we have a central database that is, with all of this going on, can this be decentralized such that other players in this field can use the data? And what really do we need to get this thing up off the ground? And then secondary to that, triage logic. How do we figure out what needs need to be met first? Because in a disaster, not just the actual supplies, WNC supply sites does that themselves. That is just based on scarcity. Every need is needed. But on volunteering, there's going to be some form of logic and triage that needs to occur. So building out a formal system for that, if that has not already been done, it likely already has been in practice, but not in development. I need to know about that. We need to know about that. Moving on. That's not all, though. That's not all this can be. This can be so much more. We're looking for co-development on all fronts aforementioned and going forward. If you're working on similar problems, let's sync up and help each other. This is something that we do not need to be doing alone. This does not need to be siloed. We need this to be a community effort for it to get off the ground. So, specifically, some of the areas that we're going to be looking into is trust, vetting, and micro-credentials. Figuring out how to build out a chain of trust model, that being verifying roles based on history, reviews, potentially even in-person ID checks, and figuring out who can do what tasks in a volunteer setting. Apparently, it was a big thing for people with a hero complex to steal people's identities to try and cause harm, potentially, or to get into places they shouldn't. It's a security and a cybersecurity issue that is definitely solvable and likely has been solved. It just needs to be implemented in a better way. So we're seeking partners to prototype trust scoring system if we want to do some form of scoring system akin to like the eBay reviews or something like that. Or integrating with tools like ID.me, the eBay style thing, or building our own micro-credential ecosystem for volunteering. I like to call it skills-based matchmaking with volunteering opportunities. That's something I personally want to build out. Secondary, asynchronous and planetary participation. We are in the digital era. Those who are not directly in the disaster can still help out, and if not, need to help out. So building out translation tools, time zone agnostic coordination, and remote roles. We need help designing systems for info management without central bottlenecks. I had a good chat with Jonesy, and this was something that he brought up. Ways to have that information management from the backseat, from somebody just on their computer miles away. That is completely doable. So what we're asking for in co-development is insights kind of into how this can be flushed out. Any tool chains that y'all have used and replacements for anything proprietary. What functionalities would be needed in something like this? Things we really are intrigued by. We're currently operating on Airtable and looking to get off of that due to pricing and also just due to limitations in the gamification side of things. So any insight into that is much appreciated in both short-term and long-term. Again, as stated, I am aware of the TAK and the who's where doing what. I'm really intrigued and need to look into it further. It was just brought up to my knowledge today again by that chat with Jonesy. And I would love to talk to people about it. I am genuinely curious. This is my ask. But what this is relevant for is edge networking and offline mode. So figuring out ways that, especially during a disaster situation, if the internet goes down, that there's interoperability between intranets and figuring out ways that, say we've got this person going and doing volunteering, they show up to a site and they have Wi-Fi. They can connect to that local database, get their information synced out there, and then when things come back online, even if just for a second, that information can be synced to an internet. All goes to say that we need to figure out ways to do local server discovery, peer syncing, offline first logic. This is not something I have done before, therefore I need assistance. If you've worked on edge networking or austere environment coordination, we'd love your technical insights. This is something that, as stated, we have not done before, and we don't think this has been done at the scale that we're trying to do it. So we need help. This needs to be a community effort. And the big one, figuring out a way to have a standard for needs, people, and resources. Some form of database needs to be made, an actual open standard for this, such that a big company that I will not name just swoops in and charges for this. This is something we can do as a community, and it's an ongoing thing. I'm coming into the tail end of this, but figuring out the schema that we can all agree on for something like this, such that this database can be something that is for all disaster relief endeavors. So, as such, we need help designing that schema. If it's not already being designed, we need to push that. A way to index needs, a way to index the urgency of those needs, a way to index resources, whether or not they're deployable and available, a way to index people, their skills, their roles, their readiness. We're seeking feedback on this. We're seeking feedback on where that could live, whether or not we can decentralize it even. Who holds the index is the question, yes, but who cares? It just needs to be there. We'll figure something out. These are the big questions that we're trying to ask with this. What makes a person volunteer? Really, what makes a person volunteer? How do we motivate readiness without inducing fear? How do you handle bad actors at scale without centralizing too much power? And finally, can community-generated data drive readiness scores and equity-aware dashboards? That last point is something that I neglected to mention. I don't think it's in the next slide. One big part of this is, I didn't even talk about R4Dash. Oh my goodness. R4Dash is supposed to be the dashboard for all of this coordination. It goes hand in hand with the mobile side of things that the volunteers are going to be using, but on the actual decision makers side, there needs to be a lot of information. There needs to be informed decision making occurring. So figuring out how we can kind of synthesize all of that data into key points, key dashboards, and as stated, informed decision making for especially disaster scenarios. It's something that I can go into more in person, as this video is running quite long, and I apologize, but I'm just going to tie it off with a neat little bow. How can you help? Jump in on the MVP builds, co-develop parallel components, share your wisdom, failures, or frameworks that you've used, and then once it's up, reach out to us to try and get a pilot going. We believe AidArena and R4 share the same DNA: decentralized care, informed coordination, and infrastructure for humanity. If you're working on any of the above, or want to be, we want to hear from you. Project and repo, please help. This is going to be the next likely years of my life. I would like to get this done. Thank you.